It had rained all night, and the morning was not expected to stop. Charlestown was flooded with water and mud from the cars coming in from the surrounding land. Hiller was glad he'd bought his boots with him, a last-minute impulse buy before heading to McDonald's for a breakfast on the go. He hadn't forgotten his umbrella and raincoat either, but at this time of year, they were a necessity. Considering it had rained during the night, he expected he would need them. The previous day's stakeout had failed, but he wasn't too worried about that. He just enjoyed the ride with the windows open, breathing in the freshness of the ground after the heavy downpour. That was until he was stuck in crawling traffic for an hour, passing a 3-car accident caused by the dampness that clogged the entire 2-lane highway. When he finally pulled into Charlestown, he wasn't in the best of moods. He went straight to the local police station and showed his badge to the sergeant on duty, who straightened up when he saw him. He rang the bell, and an equally anxious detective in an equally rumpled suit came out a minute later with a plastic cup that Hiller was sure contained the dreaded coffee. He gestured for Hiller to return and opened the door in front of him. "Detective Hiller? I'm Detective David Hansen. How can we help our cosmopolitan brethren today?" Hansen's voice was tired but detached and precise, and his expression was enough to raise an eyebrow. His voice just didn't fit his face. "Nice to meet you, Detective Hansen. So, yeah, I'm not really here on business. I'm here on a more personal mission, testing a hunch. I hope you can help." Hiller was escorted to a seat next to a neat desk that held a computer, a phone, and almost nothing else. He raised an eyebrow at that, too. A cop's desk was never clean. Hansen noticed the look in his eyes and said, "It's all digital here now, Chief. Paper stays on the trees. So how can we help you?" "Joe Sullivan," Hiller answered without preamble. Hansen wrinkled his nose. "And what did Charlestown's best Boy Scout do?" he asked. "So he's from here?" "1 point for guessing," Hiller smiled. "Oh yes, he's from here. The locals consider him something of a forest fairy and protect him from everything. Not long ago, he was involved in a case of some sort. I once had to drag him drunk out of a bar. By sheer luck, I happened to be there and saw him breaking up a couple of redneck assholes who were hitting on one of the girls to sing karaoke. He absolutely trashed those guys, albeit in the most clumsy way possible, and I had to get him out of there before he did any real damage to himself. He even lashed out at me, and I sent him to a cell to sober up. He was very apologetic the next day." "Sounds like our guy," Hiller said. "So what do you want?" Hansen inquired. "Just trying to track him down, that's all. He was found dead on our property, was killed protecting a woman from robbers." Hansen set the glass aside. "Shit, that sucks. The folks around here aren't going to like it much. Did you find the killer?" Hiller frowned. "No. The bastard got away. We know who he is, and we got his 2 accomplices. The woman put up a good defense and took 2 of them down, but the other scumbag got behind her back, pulled a knife, and that's when Joe intervened. He grappled with him, got stabbed, and that's all she wrote." "Oh, shit. Gee," Hansen sighed. "So yeah, just trying to figure out where he came from. Seeing if anyone needs to be notified, and because, well, I'm just really curious about this guy. He seems like a nice guy who's had a lot of shit dumped on him. You know, where he laid his head? Yeah, we had to drop him off there after that drunk tank incident. He lives in one of the cabins on Trolley Fields. It's just outside of town. I'll give you the address." Hiller leaned back in his chair while Hansen fiddled with the computer and thought, "It's always nice when a hunch is confirmed." He considered texting April that he'd found where Joe lived, but decided to wait until he'd been there himself. He must help all the survivors first. Next chapter. Well, I've done it again. Into the breach, dear friends. I'm a married man again. And it feels great. I've done it right this time. The perfect woman I can finally trust again. Penny looked amazing today. Manny even came into town to be best man. I haven't seen him since the Cambridge event. I'm glad he's still on his feet. He looks great, working as a Harley salesman in Wisconsin. I was so glad to see him. Last time we talked, I was in terrible shape, and he said I was feeling much better. We're at the airport now, going to Bermuda for a week. I can't wait to see what Penny has packed for the honeymoon. I felt like sending Tara a picture of the two of us, but that would just be petty, and she doesn't care. She'd made it clear she was done with me. So screw her. The best revenge is to live well, and by God, I'm going to do just that. Even Mary Ann showed up at the wedding, which just amazed me. She does her hair well. I was very surprised to see her there with her husband. She was watching me very closely, but I didn't care. It's my day. Well, mine and Penny's. Next chapter. Hiller pulled into the muddy Trolley Fields parking lot and parked in the exact same spot April had parked in the day before. He was wearing heavy boots and didn't have to pick through the mud like April had, which was just as well, since the ground was soggy and crumbly after the rain. He ran into the guest house and found it almost exactly as April had the night before, only this time there was a stumpy fat man sleeping soundly in one of the chairs in front of the fireplace, his hands clasped together on his stomach, and a half-full bottle of Johnny Walker and an empty glass on the table beside him. Hiller could feel the man's breath coming from the door, and it wasn't very pleasant. He deliberately pounded on the door to try to wake the man, and when that didn't work, went over to the desk and pounded the bell several times. This had the same effect. Hiller waited a few moments, just in case this amazing specimen of humanity wasn't a porter, and when no one came, went over to the man and simply shook him until he came out of his alcoholic slumber. The man slumped off his chair, fell to the floor, cursed, and started to get to his feet. He stood up, looked around with the cloudy eyes of a man not yet fully awake or aware of himself, mumbled something, and, ignoring Hiller's presence, shuffled over to the table. Once at the table, he looked a little more awake and, spreading both arms to keep himself on his feet, muttered, "What can I do for you, sir? Do you need a cabin for the weekend?" Hiller only looked at him, got straight to the point, and said, "Joe Sullivan. What's his cabin like?" "Why should I tell you?" the man said, trying to look haughty but actually looking sad. Hiller revealed his badge. The man struggled to focus on it, but still said, "Excellent. Cabin 37. He's been popular lately. 2 people looking for him in 2 days?" Hiller was about to leave when he stopped and turned around. 2? "Yeah, a prostitute the other day. Pretty girl. I wouldn't mind one myself. She's probably still there. Apparently Joe's a real piece of work, if you know what I mean." The man's hips made movements that disgusted Hiller. Then Hiller's eyes narrowed. "Blonde? Well-built? Drives a convertible?" "Yeah, looks like her. Very pretty. I can imagine." Hiller snorted and stepped out of the cab. April Carlyle was here. She had found him, and before Hiller did. The insolent cow. Oh, words would be said, no doubt. Next chapter. Hiller pulled up next to April's Nissan Z, which meant she was still here. He walked to the front door of the cabin, kicked the porch with his boots to drive off the dirt, and went straight inside without bothering to knock. April was sitting in front of the fireplace, where there was a weak fire, just embers. The cabin smelled of coffee, and she was wrapped in a blanket. At her feet lay a black Labrador dog, who was now barking as hard as he could. Hiller stopped in the doorway, pondering what to do. Should he take his piece? Was the dog dangerous? He looked back for a second. Although the dog was going crazy, yelling at him, it was only pacing back and forth. Hiller looked at April, who smiled weakly back at him. He noticed that her makeup was badly smeared and streaks of mascara were running down her face. She had obviously been crying. She looked at the dog and said sharply, "Max, stop it!" The dog stopped barking, turned and looked at her questioningly. "On your bed, Max. Go away," she said just as sharply. The dog turned and went to the big pillow on the floor by the stairs to the attic. He curled up on it and laid his head down, keeping his eyes on Hiller. Hiller held up his hands and said, "Can I come to the bench?" April smiled weakly and said, "I spent hours trying to find the right phrase for him, but I finally got it right. Joe would never have a dog he didn't train. Once inside, Hiller sat down on the small sofa next to the upholstered chair and studied her. So you found this place first? Good girl. I wish I knew how you did it. April stood up abruptly, throwing back the blanket, and walked over to Hiller. She leaned over, took his face in both hands, and kissed him. This was completely unexpected by Hiller. She was a very attractive woman, not his type, and it was shocking. It didn't stop him from kissing her back, but it was so unexpected that it didn't make him feel good about himself. He didn't voice any of the questions that were swirling around in his head. Ambrose, I know this is unexpected, but I need you to carry me to bed. Right now. Please. I need to feel something other than what I'm feeling right now. What I've read is breaking my heart, and I can't keep feeling this way. Take me upstairs right now and do it. Please. A tremor could be heard in April's voice, like she was close to breaking down, and Hiller had to weigh this unexpected request. Should he do it, give her short-term relief, but then accept that it had happened, and she might be angry at him for taking advantage? Or should he respectfully refuse, hoping to take the moral high ground and hope she would understand him in the future? The choice? Screw it. He was a guy and hadn't had any fun in months. He stood up, she took his hand and led him upstairs to the small bedroom in the attic. There was a double bed with a faux animal skin cover. It was comfortable and looked clean. They hadn't wasted any time. So much shit could come down on one person. So many bad things, so many betrayals, and all at the hands of those he trusted and loved. And every time he tried to do that, something else crumbled. He couldn't even save someone else's life, lest he become the villain. It was so desperately unfair and wrong. And then he died, saving her life. On top of the survivor's guilt, it was too much. And now, she needed Hiller. Next chapter. She set the coffee down, and then Hiller appeared, tucking his shirt into his pants. Shall we talk about it? He asked uncertainly, lowering himself into one of the two chairs at the small breakfast table. April smiled and handed him a cup of hot coffee. No, it was a one-time thing. I hope you realize that. There's no relationship here. I just needed you. And you were there for me. I hope you weren't upset. We're not in love with each other because we had fun once. Twice, Hiller muttered, taking a sip of scalding hot coffee. That was twice. April smiled softly and sat down across from him. Excuse me, big day for you? She teased. Shut up, Hiller replied in a level voice, but his smile didn't match his tone. April chuckled. Well, speaking as someone with experience, you're not so bad. You can make a woman happy, you know. Hiller raised an eyebrow, but didn't bother asking the obvious question. He didn't think he wanted to know the answer. So what now? What's got you so upset? He asked, trying to put concern in his voice. He didn't want to return April to the state she was in when he arrived, but he needed answers. Joe kept a journal. He took it as an assignment from his therapist. It's horrible reading. This man was abused by everyone he trusted and loved, Ambrose. I don't know how he didn't put a gun to his head and end it all. He was screwed by the military, by his two wives, both of whom cheated on him in the most horrible way possible, and then by the family of children he saved from drowning. So what did he do? He tried to help other people instead. And he died saving me from a knife wound. This guy wasn't a Boy Scout. He was Jesus Christ himself back on Earth. I came here looking for answers, and I got an ocean of guilt on top of what I already had. April ran her hands through her hair. I just can't get over what those women put him through. The second one is even worse than the first. She knew what he'd already been through and did it anyway. Can I read it? I think it might be proof, April. I may have to take it. If it details an illegal act. April held her ground. She didn't shift her gaze to the book lying on the side table. She simply said, No. Hiller's eyebrows rose. No? He repeated. April, this is almost a crime scene. But it isn't. And you're out of your jurisdiction anyway, so don't be so arrogant and powerful. Hiller shrugged. Sure, but one phone call? He left it hanging. Ambrose, I don't mind you picking up the magazine, but not right now. I have to do something with it first. I've got plans. If you feel something for this man, let me take it. I can do what you can't. What must happen? There must be retribution and compensation, and I can do it. Legally. She added the last word. Let me do it. Legally. Are you sure of that? Oh, yes. Completely. Ethically, though you could say it's very moral. These bitches need a lesson in humility and hurting people, but legally? Sure. I need to do it. I need to do it. Joe needs it. April could already see that Hiller was hesitating. It seemed to her that her entreaties and the way they'd spent the day were working on him. He opened his mouth and closed it again, thinking. Then said abruptly, What the hell? It's not official anyway. Sure, go ahead. Put it out of your mind. But I want to read this soon, okay? I want to get to know this guy too. April smiled, jumped up and ran to Hiller to give him a hug. He knew the rest of the day might go differently depending on what he did next, but he decided not to procrastinate. He'd already had his fun. Twice. And now it was time to be a good guy. Come on, sit down. I've already got carpet burns. April raised her eyebrows at him, but still went and sat down as commanded. So what's next? He asked her. Well, for one thing, I'm buying this place. You're what? Hiller marveled. Yeah, Joe bought it for next to nothing. It was in such disrepair that the guy at the front door, this nice man Ted, have you met him yet? Hiller nodded. Yes, with him. He sold it to Joe for $10,000 for his exclusive use for life, on the condition that Joe repair it and act as engineer to maintain the place. You wouldn't guess it, but all the cabins are in great shape thanks to Joe. So he did. He got a place where his ex-wives would never be able to find him. If I offer $15,000, Ted gets paid twice, and he doesn't lose anything he's already lost. Hiller laughed. Smart man. I wish I could do something like that. I don't think you quite understand Ambrose. He wasn't hiding from them because they wanted something. He was hiding because they didn't want to leave him alone. Tara, his first, finally came to her senses, realized what she had done to him, and kept looking for ways to make amends, completely unaware that it was impossible to make amends for something like this. Her desperate need to forgive herself led her to stalk Joe. And no matter how nice a guy he was, he couldn't make her leave him alone. What made it especially difficult was that he was still in love with her. Added to all of this was the fact that he simply didn't know why she did it. Her explanations were in a different realm of existence than his, and he simply didn't have a frame of reference to understand them. He blamed himself, but he didn't even know what he should change. He needed to get away, crawl away, and lick his wounds for good. So he found this place where he could be anonymous and be alone. Jesus, this guy's life. It's all in the journal, and from what I learned by finding this place. I've met with both wives. Both, let me tell you, are a piece of work. His therapist, his old landlord, everything else. Yes, I was wondering how you ended up here before me, Mrs. Therapist. Therapist. What do you actually do? Let's just say I work for the agency and leave it at that, okay? No questions, no lies. Hiller snorted, but left it at that. It wasn't worth the hassle. So you bought yourself a new cottage for the weekend, so what's next? How about a wonder dog? April's eyes sparkled. She looked at Max, who jumped up from his pillow when he saw her looking at him. Max and I aren't breaking up. He's my new boyfriend. Are dogs allowed in your house? What a strange question. But no, they're not allowed. But you know what? April tilted her head toward him. I guess I just decided to buy the house. Anyway, my lease expires next month, and I've already thought about it a couple times. Yeah, time to settle down. Time to buy a house. Screw it. You're buying a house just so you can get a dog? April's eyes flashed dangerously. No, I'd buy a house just to have Joe's dog, she said in a low voice. Hiller stepped back. Okay, so what's next? April smiled. The danger had passed. Well, first a shower, then time to propose to Mr. Universe, then I have to meet some people. And a funeral needs to be organized. Next chapter. I think I met someone. I wasn't expecting this. I still feel damaged. It's been 2 years and I still haven't met anyone. Marianne has encouraged me to go on dates, but honestly, nothing has stuck. Most of the women I meet are either married or looking for something that isn't right for me. It becomes clear in the first 10 minutes. I don't know, maybe it's just me. It's hard to tell when you're on the inside looking out. Anyway, I'm on an Alaskan cruise, whale watching. At the bar, I made some snide remarks that judging by the size of some of the women on the ship, we didn't need to go to Alaska, we could just sit by the pool. A little bitter, but still funny. There was a very cute blonde woman, sitting there, laughing and chewing on a stirrer, and my goodness, she was making eyes at me. You mean me? Mr. Loser. She's so damn pretty and her name is Penny and we just sat and chatted all day at the bar. I didn't even feel any of the drinks. Now she's lying next to me on the bed, snoring softly. One thing's for sure. Next time I rent a cabin, I'm taking her with a queen-sized bed. Next chapter. April had had a busy couple days. Negotiating the cabin took longer than she had anticipated, and the obnoxious cabin owner wanted more than she was willing to give. He kept hinting at sit-downs, and she kept wanting to throw up. It ended up costing $17,000, but she now had exclusive use of the cabin for life. Ted's only regrets were that he hadn't had time to have fun with April and that he was without an attendant. She took Max home with her, and although the apartment complex didn't allow pets, she bribed the doorman to look the other way for the next month. She stopped by work and had a word with the R&D staff, who confirmed what she'd already suspected, that Aaron Glasso was not Mark Glasso's son. In fact, he was Joe Sullivan's son. The DNA sample she'd gotten, as well as the sample from Joe's body, the fact that she was the one paying for the funeral home had its own benefit, spoke for itself. There was no doubt, nor had there been any, when April saw Aaron and Mark in the same room. If she had seen it, she wondered, how had no one commented on it to Mark? At the end of the day, she knocked on the door of Penny and Mark Galso's apartment. She timed it so that Mark would already be home, or should have been, and she was met at the door by Penny, who recognized her immediately. Mark, it's that legal lady who was talking about the will. Penny smiled at her and gestured for her to come in. April swung the door open, causing Penny to flinch. Hey, you shouldn't have pushed so hard. Penny glared at her. And you don't have to be a disgusting slut like that, Penny. But you are, and here we are. There was a stunned silence. What? What? What did you say? I called you a disgusting slut, Penny. Now sit down before I make you sit down. I think you should leave, Penny stammered, looking very upset. What's going on here? Mark demanded, entering the room and glancing from April to Penny. She's insulting me, Mark. Calling me a slut. Mark looked angrily at April, who only shrugged and replied, Well, she is. You know that. You married her, and had fun with her for almost a year while you worked for her husband, who had no idea. You're an asshole yourself. Let's be honest, you do deserve each other. Mark's eyes widened, and he took a step toward April, clearly very angry, and squared off. What the hell do you think you have the right to come into my house and say things like that? What are you going to do? April interrupted, not the least bit startled. What are you going to do, Mark? Are you going to hit me? You're a goddamn weakling who steals his wife and is too cowardly to even find a woman. No, you're just stepping into someone else's marriage, ruining it, and taking someone else's business with you. What kind of man does that? Oh, wait, a man like you. A little wimp with a winning smile and an evil mind. God, you're such a prize. You must be so proud, Penny. Mark lost his temper and lunged at April. She spotted him and let his arm drop, and when he did, used her left hand as a knife point to hold his arm there, and with her other hand, she grabbed his pinky finger and yanked it back. Mark wriggled under her, trying to hold his arm back so she wouldn't break his finger. April manipulated his finger so that Mark was on the ground and then crashed face first into the coffee table. She let go of him, and he rose to his feet, breathing heavily. Penny, you should probably get some tissues to wipe up Wonder Boy's blood. Take plenty. There might be more if your asshole husband tries to do it again. Who the hell are you? Mark said, breathing through his mouth as Penny tried to wipe his face. April sank down on the couch and smiled at them, then started saying what she wanted to say. I am a goddamn angel of retribution. I am the black wings of the righteous one who has come to rain fire on you bastards for what you did to Joe Sullivan. It's always happened, and now it's happened. I'm here, and you need to sit down and shut up while your little worlds come to an end. If you offer me violence, I will destroy you, as we've already found out. So sit down and listen. Or don't. Either way, it doesn't matter. I'm here in Joe Sullivan's place, and if he may have allowed you to continue your sordid tale of betrayal, I'm not so lenient, so listen up, kids. Your lives, as you know them, have just ended. Penny's mouth opened and closed, and she glanced at Mark, who was still trying to deal with the aftermath of our scuffle. Both of them just stood there, not knowing what to do. I said sit down. Penny just sat down, and Mark stood there with rage in his eyes, clenching his hands into fists powerlessly. He finally sat down next to Penny, still gingerly touching his nose. So, where do we start? Penny, you're a worthless gold-digging whore. No, don't argue. We all know you are. Let's start with this. So you decided to cheat on Joe with this equally worthless piece of crap? How did it start? How did it start? What didn't Joe give you? Penny looked back at Mark and then at Penny in obvious confusion. Stop looking at him, Penny. In a second, you'll realize why you need to stop listening to what Mark is saying. Answer the question. I needed more. Of what? Everything. Joe was wonderful and nice, and he had a business, but it was clear things weren't going the way he'd hoped. He didn't want to take business from the Mercanos, and they own the market here. He was just, making ends meet. I met Mark, and it was clear he was on the rise. He doubled Joe's business in a month. Mark was on a high. He loved to have fun. Joe never did. He liked to have fun. I found that out pretty quickly. He treated me the way I wanted to be treated. Joe put me on a pedestal. Do you have any idea how great it was to get both? Being loved by Joe and having fun with Mark? But I knew I had to make a choice. I feel sorry for Joe, I really do. He was a good guy, but he wasn't going anywhere. He sold me a product and I took it back because it wasn't what it said on the tin. Penny began to act belligerent, the way people who have been caught in a mistake and are fighting back with very thin self-justifications behave. April considered her and said, well, as a whore, and let's be clear, that's exactly what you are. I have to say what you did was not very nice. Selling yourself and your marriage for this? She gestured around the cluttered apartment. Making ends meet? Screw it. I don't think there's much more here than you had with Joe. Why haven't you moved on again, Penny? That's your thing, isn't it? Not enough. Move on to the next one. Something must be keeping you here. Penny's eyes darted to the bedroom door. Oh, yes, Aaron. Of course, what was I thinking? Must stay for the baby's sake. For good old daddy's sake. Tell me, Penny, because I'd really like to know. Does Mark know that Aaron isn't his? That he really belongs to Joe? That you're such an evil person that you lied to his real father and told him he wasn't? The ultimate act of betrayal that betrays what an evil and downright evil person you really are. Did Mark know, or did you successfully lie to him as well? Penny turned to Mark, who was now staring at her in horror. That's not true, darling. You know I did the test. I told you. I sent the letter to Joe. Aaron is yours, she said in desperation, searching Mark's face for understanding. He just stared at her. Of course it's not true. What a load of nonsense. Are you really going to trust her, Mark? Once a liar, always a liar. Here, you can check it out. April tossed the stapled document onto the coffee table. She nodded at it. Here you go. The full DNA analysis taken from Aaron and Joe. There's a 99.99% probability of paternity. Don't believe me? Do the analysis yourself and you'll see. How anyone can't see that is beyond me. Surely you remember what Joe looked like. Aaron doesn't look anything like you, Mark. I can see that. Why can't you? Mark shifted his gaze from Penny to April and began reaching for the document. Penny broke into the conversation, whimpering. Mark, no, it's not what you think. Honestly, baby, it isn't. Aaron is your son. You raised him. So you knew. You goddamn whore. I thought he was mine. I thought that was part of the reason we got married. Jesus. Mark seemed to just fall into himself as he studied the document. Well, now Penny's on the outs. You want to explain yourself? Come on, girl. Now's as good a time as any. I had to say it. I needed Joe to leave. We needed to start alone. Mark, he's your kid. Don't you see that? Who cares who his donor was? We're family. We're together. We're for each other. Don't you see that? April laughed. Oh, yes. A family that lies to each other. Wait, what else do they say? Penny threw April a look full of fury. Oh, don't pout. We're not done yet, not at all. Honestly, I don't understand how you could do that to Joe. It's just bloody evil. What did he ever do to you to make you do that to him? Lie to him like that? To take away the one thing he could always claim as his own? Do you realize what you've done? Penny looked away and said, What he didn't have, he would never let go of. I had to do it. Mark and I needed it. I wasn't even sure it wasn't Mark's. What was the point of making a fuss about it? He accepted that it wasn't his and it was fine. Wow, just wow. You really deserve what's coming your way. Your turn first, Mark. First, this. April pulled out her cell phone and made a call. She waited 2 beeps until she was connected, then said, Dermot, how are you doing? No, almost finished. Need to do a favor, so thanks for waiting and letting me call your private line. Who do we know at Treasury? Oh, David Johnson. Oh yeah, I remember him. He owes us, doesn't he? Deanna is what he needs, no doubt. But here's what I need. I need a forensic audit of the IRS. Yeah, that's right. We should do it at Glasso Design. Yeah, GLASSO, based out of Aspen Hill. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Dermot. All this time she was looking at Mark, and he just stared back at her, expressionless. When she finished, he said, Haven't you done enough? First I find out my baby isn't mine, thanks to that super slut, and now I'm being audited by the IRS? Oh, is my liquor upset? Oh boy, we can't have that, can we? We have to make you really upset, so let's do it. April dug through her purse and pulled out another file of documents in a manila folder. She tossed it on the coffee table following the first document. Several pictures spilled out of it, and when Penny started to reach for one of them, Mark, seeing what it was, yelled no and tried to reach for them. Penny managed to get there first and incomprehensibly picked up a picture that showed Mark standing with a slender brunette. She dropped the photo and picked up another. In this picture, the girl was on her knees and Mark was entering her deeply. The quality of the pictures was grainy, but the content was clear. She looked at April in shock, then at Mark. What? What? What is that, Mark? What is that? Is that Melissa? It is indeed Melissa, Mark's personal assistant. As far as we can tell, this has been going on for a while, Penny. We haven't been doing business at home, have we? Tisk, tisk, tisk. Not a good idea with a man who thinks nothing of taking another man's wife. She's married, by the way, in case you didn't know, and with a child, and another one on the way. Say it. You don't think it could be Mark's real baby, do you? The one he actually gave birth to? What do you think, Penny? It's a lie, Penny. It's a total lie. It's photoshopped. That bitch is just trying to cause trouble to divide us. Penny just stared at him, still not understanding anything. Well, you can say that, but it's not true. The file is full of times and dates, and a couple of videotapes my guys got from the cheap motel they use when there are people in the office. It's grainy, but I think you'll get the gist of it. So, let's summarize. Marks is going to have serious business problems because he's going to be hassled for weeks by the IRS. You didn't tell him that his own son wasn't his, and Mark was having an affair with his personal assistant, and you didn't know it. Now you really have an idea of what you goddamn assholes did to Joe. There was silence for a second, then Penny sobbed. So, let's make sure we all understand the situation. I can do more if I want to. I just don't want to right now. I think we've had enough bombshells for today. The only thing you'll do, Penny, is tell Aaron the truth about his background. He'll be confused, but he's young and he'll get used to it. Mark, you're pretty much his father, and as much as it pains me to admit it, even you, as much of an asshole as you are, will do a better job than none at all. So you're going to stand by him and continue to love him, or I'll know the reason why. Am I being clear? Both Penny and Mark looked at April with unconcealed hatred in their eyes. April smiled back and stood up. Okay, isn't anyone going to see me off? Mark didn't get up, but Penny did. She lunged at April, screaming, "Bitch!" The act shocked Mark, who had never seen Penny like that before, but it didn't shock April at all. She ducked and let Penny crash into the wall. Then she stepped forward, lightly but determinedly, and pulled Penny by the shoulder so that she twisted in place. She grabbed her left arm and pinned her against the wall, and with her right hand, she put her arm around Penny's throat. "Mark, sit down!" she shouted, looking back at Mark, who was standing and looked ready to engage in a fight. He looked pretty intimidating, all the blood on his shirt and face, but his expression radiated indecision. "Penny and I are only going to talk, Mark. Sit down." April said it again, hissing in Penny's face. Penny slumped against the wall, her eyes staring at April, widened with fear. "Okay, bitch. So this is it. I'm Joe's retribution. I've been coming to this for a long time. Honestly, you're lucky I didn't raze the place to the ground. You're lucky you have a son that I care about, otherwise some very bad things would have happened here today. I'm mad as hell on behalf of the man you insulted and lied to, and the payback starts now. If you piss me off anymore, you'll end up in the hospital eating through a tube. Do I make myself clear?" Penny couldn't nod, so she tried to say, "Yes. Yes." "Good. I'm going to let you down now. You try anything else and you'll fly out the front window. Do you understand?" April loosened her grip, and Penny nodded when she could. Her hands were pressed to her throat, where April's handprint was clearly visible. "Glad to hear that. Now, you bastards. It's a shitty day. I'm out of here. And no, you're not in the will. I'm happy to report." April gathered her bag and walked out, slamming the door behind her, leaving Mark and Penny staring at each other, breathing heavily. Next chapter. Today I started my own business. It's all part of a 5-year plan. Marianne helped me put it together. Honestly, this woman is a godsend. She's like my therapist, life planner, and best friend all rolled into one. So yeah, I started working on my own. Doing the same things I did at Mercano's, but now I'm the boss. I was hoping I could get some of the clients I had at Mercano's, but we'll see how it works out. I don't want to get involved with anyone from the old neighborhood. God knows, most of them knew what was going on and not one bastard told me. I don't think I have any real friends there, and I don't need the stress. I say we, but that's just me, moved into a small office on the west side. It's small and not particularly flashy. It needs to be refinished and painted, but it's cheap. It's mine and it's my new home, so we'd better get used to it. Setting up a business takes a lot of time, that's for sure. There are so many things to sign. But Sullivan Services is up and running. Now we just have to make it work. I've never been afraid of hard work, and I'm not going to be afraid now. Next year, I'll already be sailing and have a staff of 20. Expect. The second part of life starts now. I'm not going to think about Tara and the asshole at all. Screw them. Screw them all at the Mercanos. Someday they're going to come to me for a job, and then I can laugh at them. I've been reading some stories online about people in my situation. It turns out that people are writing bestsellers, working out, becoming boo-boos, or writing songs, or discovering some other ways to become mega successful now that they aren't held back by a cheating spouse. I don't think that will happen to me. But maybe I can be successful by working only for myself. To hell with Mercanos. Who needs them? Next chapter. Tara Western hung up the phone and sighed. It had been a shitty week. Her committee had started infighting among board socialites. They had money, and they all wanted to be in charge. The boards of the 3 companies she served on were also in chaos. One company was fighting for its life with a hostile takeover, another with a new startup offering the same services, but for almost free, and the third was simply stagnating. It needed new leadership and courage, and the 58-year-old CEO they had now just wasn't the right fit. It was all very stressful, and the news of Joe's passing also got her thinking. She'd been looking for him for so long, so desperate to make it up to him as best she could. She could well understand his reluctance. She'd left him no choice and had simply done what she thought was right, without thinking of the long-term consequences for him, without considering that he'll get over it. Better quick and fast than long and drawn out. Now he was gone. The chance for forgiveness was gone. It was weighing on her, and she'd had several horrible dreams over the past 2 nights. One night she had spent sitting with a bottle of wine, going over her life choices and realizing how screwed up and one-sided most of them had been. She was tired, exhausted, and had no idea how bad it was going to be. The call came from the waiting room. The female investigator came back and said she needed to see Tara. She was invited to a conference room on the 2nd floor, the one overlooking the golf course. Taking a coffee, Tara entered the conference room and saw April sitting off to the side. She noticed that she hadn't gotten up when Tara entered the room, and it seemed inappropriate, but Tara accepted it. She was having a bad day as it was. She didn't need to get into trouble over someone she would never see again. She quickly sat down, set her coffee down, and tried to smile. "Yeah. April? What can I do for you today? Any progress on the investigation?" April just stared at her. She seemed to be weighing the whole situation. Tara, the room, even the color of her hair. The silence stretched on for a full minute. Tara was about to say something when April said, "Yeah, actually, I found where he lived. I found a lot of things in general. And I have to say, Mrs. Western, I don't like any of them very much. I didn't realize Joe had such incredible whores as wives. All morals and ethics like a stoned whore." There was a stunned silence as Tara tried to comprehend what she had just been told. Had this woman really just called her a whore? "Excuse me, did you just—" Stammering, she whispered. "Called you a whore?" "Yes. Although I have to say, sluts get a lot more respect from me than you do. Most whores I know are hard-working girls who don't hide the fact that they work for a living. Good luck to them, I say. And you? You're a sneaky, traitorous bitch who makes us all look bad. You had fun with someone to get an advantage and have the nerve to say you're in love. Goddamn career whore. That's all you are, Tara. A career whore, in every sense of the word. Do you ever care about anyone? Besides yourself, I mean? I'm curious." April's tone was even, and the question was asked with genuine curiosity. I think I need to call security." Tara managed to mumble it out and reached for the phone. "You do that, Tara. Call security. I'll leave easily, no questions asked. But before I do, let me explain a few things to you. What happens next?" Tara held the phone in her hand, her finger ready to dial, but for some reason, she just didn't press the buttons. The woman in front of her, saying these things, was unfazed. There was no anger in her. Perhaps she was discussing the color of the wallpaper. There was something terrifying and yet ordinary about it all. Terrifying because to this woman, it was ordinary. Good. I've got your attention. So, let's get it straight. First of all, I know everything you did to Joe. Everything. How he felt about it, what you did, how he tried to pull himself together, everything. I even know about the business you tried to put him in. You know that Joe moved to a cabin in the woods to be away from you? You and that other bitch. Yeah, just because of what you did to him. I hope you're proud of yourself. I hope what you got was worth it. Although, looking around and seeing your brand new Mercedes, I'm sure it was. For you. Too bad someone else paid for it, huh? But it's been that way all your life, hasn't it? It's always someone else paying. Right up until the moment your politically favorable marriage fell apart. How does it feel when someone does to you what you did to Joe? It hurts, doesn't it? I bet it was very painful for people like you, those who are so desperate for control. That's why you pushed this job on Joe, isn't it? A clumsy move on your part, but I understand why you did it. April was so talkative that Tara just sat and listened, fascinated to the core. April smiled at her and put something on the table. So it's payback time. It's payback time. It's Jaws's journal. Tara caught the notebook and picked it up. There was a CD taped to the last page. She picked it up and opened the page at random, desperately playing for time to gather her thoughts while noting Joe's neat, spidery handwriting. He never wrote in cursive. He claimed it was out of his power. But in fact, his regular handwriting looked great, almost like typewriting. It's got everything. Names, dates, everything, April said. What do you expect me to do with it? Read it? Look, I'm being honest with you. I feel really screwed up about the whole thing. But what can I do now? He's gone. I'll never be able to make it up to him. I'm going to have to live with what I did, and I'm realizing more and more that it's going to be harder and harder. Reading this, she said, pointing to the book, will not help or make me more capable of fixing anything. On the contrary, April replied, smiling with a particularly nasty grimace, it will do all that and more. That's what's going to happen. I know you're on the board of directors of Garin Publishing. They have a crappy CEO that you want out, right? Tara nodded, wondering where this girl was getting her information from. At the moment, it was only known to the board members. So, you're going to publish this. Word for word, that's what the disc is. I had someone type it up. I thought you might want to see the original. I thought it could be published in this form. You know, like a written diary? Tara just sat there, not moving. Finally, she said, Did you name it? I can't publish this. It would bring about my end. April leaned forward and her tone changed dramatically. Her words now sounded even, soft and intent. Let me be clear, Mrs. Western, very clear. You are finished. You just haven't realized it yet. You're going to publish it, and you're not going to change a word in it. I have many copies of the original, and if one damn word is changed, your life is going to be even shittier than it already is. In fact, let's get one thing straight right now. April reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and made a call. Hey, Jesse, put me through to Dermot, please. Thanks. They both waited, Tara leafing through the book, searching for mentions of her name, while April watched her with the phone pressed to her ear. Dermot, it's me again. Yes, another one. No, need that one too. Another forensic audit. Yes, a full IRS audit. Yes, there's a lesson to be taught, but it's going to be this one. Tara Western's name. Serves on the boards of a bunch of companies here in DC, yeah. Forensics. The one where they crawl up your ass. Sure. Yeah, I understand. Do it, sir. Throughout the short phone conversation, April kept her gaze fixed on Tara, who stared back shocked when she realized what was being said. She ended the conversation, and Tara felt she had to do or say something. She was on the board of directors of several companies and should have been feared. She wasn't getting anything in response, so she said, Look, April or whatever your name is, I don't know what game is being played here, but I'm not playing ball. And anyone can make phone calls and pretend to know people at the IRS. Why don't you find a more worthy target for intimidation? There was silence for a few more minutes. Then April, now truly angry, with eyes blazing with the fury of a righteous man, said, "Okay, Tara. I've been trying not to be angry, but I see you pulling evil out of people. Keep in mind, I work for a government agency. I won't tell you which one, because it doesn't matter. All that matters is that I have you in my sights. I'm going to be the God Emperor of your little world. To you, I'm the angel of death, like that lawyer in Florida, but a lot less lenient. I'm capable of screwing up your life to the point where in 3 months you'll put a gun in your mouth and end it yourself. Trust me. I'm so angry at you for what you did to Joe, and what I'm telling you to do now is nothing compared to what I'll do to you if you don't. That's not a threat. It's a fact." There was silence again. Tara was defensive, and when you're defensive, you're playing for time. "I can't publish this. If my name is in there, it will ruin me. I won't have a chance for a response. My career? Your career has been on the brink of life since you left Joe. She just didn't know it yet. She was just waiting for me to show up. Well, now I'm here, and you're finished. The only question is to what extent. Your cozy jobs are over. Finished. So start getting used to that fact because it's done. You're not going to publish this? Fine, I'll pass it on to Robson Publishing. I suspect they'd love to do that. I'm giving it to you because it would be better if you did it yourself. You can publish it and retire from public life, or I'll destroy the hell out of you. And it's all legal. It's your choice. You don't want to believe me? That's fine too. Wait 3 days and we'll see what happens with the IRS. Silence again. April waited a moment and then continued her appeal. In all good beatings, there's a place where you point out to the victim the folly of her ways and give her a way out. If you do it right, you can even get them to apologize to you for the way you treated them. April hadn't expected to get that here. Tara was too well-mannered for that. But it would introduce a note of introspection that might prove useful in the future. The thing is, I think you're going to do it anyway. I think you'll do it because even you know what an incredible shit you were to that man. All he wanted to do was make you happy. But what did you do? Moved up the chain as fast as you could. What was Joe, the starter husband? He loved you. He didn't know you were so cold. Are you still that cold, Tara? Or are you starting to realize what you've done, what you're responsible for? I think I am. I think you know it's one of the only ways you can redeem yourself. You know that. And I know it. You don't need the money from this job, for God's sake. Let's face it, leaving Joe and marrying that asshole vice president has done wonders for your income. You're good for life. Tara just sat there, leafing through the book but not seeing a single page. She tried desperately not to burst into tears. She could hear. What April was saying, and her own conscience, that voice that had been keeping her from thinking straight lately, agreed with her. Suppose, for extra credibility, I do publish this book. What then? Are we done? April laughed a very unhappy laugh. Oh, we're far from done, Tara. Very far indeed. I have a few more assignments for you. Tara looked at April with a mixture of horror and anticipation. You're going to take up a new hobby. You're going to collect blankets and clothes from dry cleaners that store lost items and then give them to homeless shelters. You'll be doing it yourself personally. That's what Joe was doing the night he... April hesitated for a moment, then continued. Saved my life. Someone has to keep doing it. You're going to do it. In that sweet Mercedes of yours. You, Tara Western, are going to volunteer at a homeless shelter, putting food in containers for those in need and getting shit on your nice clothes. You won't sit on a committee of social matrons who are bored and won't go a mile to someone who really needs their help. You'll go right in there, get involved. And I'll be watching. All the goddamn time. Tara swallowed. Let's see. What else? Oh yeah, you're going to set up a scholarship in Joe's name. With your money. And you'll put over $300,000 into it. It will be awarded to the most deserving members of families who have the opportunity to send a son or daughter to college but can't afford it. Tara put the book down on the table and leaned on it to stop her hands from shaking. Oh, and you're going to set up a college fund for a particular young man. Joe didn't know he had a son. The bitch he was with kept it from him and lied to him. It did some damage. Damage that was. Long overdue. But if you cared about Joe, if you loved him, which I doubt you did, you will do this. Provide that child with a future. There was a stunned silence, which Tara broke and said in a trembling voice, "Does he have a son? What is his name? Where is he? Is he with that bitch Penny? Does he have a kid? He never knew?" Oh, damn. Oh, God. Tara burst into tears. She just sat there sobbing. April held back her usual urge to help. She knew this was exactly what Tara needed. The hard reality. This was exactly what would help her become part of society again. April let her cry for 3 minutes and then said sharply, "Tara, that baby needs you to look after her, okay? Put the tears away. You can do that later. Now, do you hear what I said? Do you understand?" Tara nodded pathetically, looking around for a tissue. April saw her do so and handed her one from her bag. While Tara wiped her eyes and pondered how she looked, her mascara must have dripped, April continued. "Make no mistake about it. You're going to do these things. Not just because I tell you to, though that's enough, but because you know it's the right thing to do. You know it's time to come clean and deal with the consequences of what you've done. It's time to pay, Tara, and you know it." There was silence for a moment as both women stared at each other. Then Tara blinked. She nodded and simply said, "Okay. One last thing. Your ex. We're going to have to deal with him. On top of what he did to you, which you thoroughly deserve, by the way, he did to Joe, and there's a price to pay for that. You were married, and he still left for you. Aside from being an unfaithful whore, it takes two to tango, so he'll get his too. I won't let it go that way." Tara nodded again, this time with more vigor. "I have some ideas, but I'd like to hear what you have to say. Not right now. Think about it, though I'm sure you've already thought about it. For now, read the book. Get it ready for publication. I'll be back in a little while to talk about it. As for the IRS, well, that will happen. But you deserve this pain, and you should know that I'm serious. Don't get in my way, and don't do what I tell you to do, or things will turn out worse for you. I'm your worst nightmare, Tara. I'm a smart bitch with resources who right now hates you for what you did to a good man. Never forget that." There was silence, and Tara sighed heavily. Then she looked at April and said, "I honestly thought we were on the same page then. I really didn't understand. We sat and talked about the future, about what we wanted. We both had dreams. He knew mine and I knew his. I just thought, this is where we're going. This is what we want. I just made my dreams come true. He didn't. I honestly thought that since I was living out my dreams, he would understand. I knew he would be hurt, but it would be over quickly, and eventually he would understand. It was business. The business of getting what you want. I thought we both realized that what we said we wanted was what we really wanted. If he had a dream, he'd hold on to it too. I would have understood." Tara realized she was babbling unnecessarily and didn't understand why she felt the urge to say that to April. April just sat there thinking about how far she needed to go with Tara. Tara needed help, and she could give it. The problem was that she didn't want to do it. She was beyond furious and ready to tear her apart if she had to. But professionalism won out. "No, you wouldn't, Tara. You think you could, but you've separated ambition and desire from reality and emotional content. You say you could because that's the reaction you expected, needed, from Joe. Say that's what you had to believe to follow through with the betrayal and abandonment of Joe, which is what you eventually did. You wouldn't have understood if he had done that to you. And what's more, deep down, you knew he would never do that to you. That's why it's so easy to say, I would understand, and even buy into the lie because it will never happen. And you know this on some subconscious level. The bottom line is that you were commensurating what you had with Joe with your ambitions and the paths you saw to get there, and it just didn't match up with reality. It wasn't one of those what he doesn't know won't hurt him excuses. There was no other ending than what you did. It was cold, calculated, and inevitable. There's nothing more to say. What that says about you, I've already said. I suspect you've come to realize it yourself lately. The fact is, you are what you are, and nothing would have saved your marriage to Joe. You ruined it too soon. Tara broke into sobs again and managed to mumble between sobs. I did love him. I did. I let him go because I thought it was for the best. Neither of us could get what we wanted together. Tara, did it ever occur to you that what he wanted was just you? The dreams you spoke of were in addition to the relationship you had. They weren't instead of, at least for him. He already had what he wanted. That's just you being a greedy bitch. With those words, April stood up, grabbed her bag, and walked toward the exit, watching Tara fidget quietly in her chair. She stopped in the doorway of the conference room and said, "Nice blouse, by the way." Next chapter. My new therapist, Marianne Thomas, advised me to keep a journal. She says it's therapeutic. I'm not good at it, but I'm such a mess right now that I'll take any help I can get. So I guess I should tell you about myself. I'm Julian Sullivan, Joe to my friends. They called me Jules in high school, but honestly, I couldn't wait for that to be a thing of the past. I was in the Army. I was in Desert Storm. I was discharged because of an injury. I was lucky to get away with it. Originally, my commanding officer wanted to dishonorably discharge me for desertion from duty. He couldn't understand that I had left my post to arm the nurses and doctors at the hospital we were defending because it was increasingly likely that we would be overrun, and I wanted to give them a chance. The local warlord wasn't going to give them one. Educated women? Yeah, first to the wall. Hell, I only got wounded because after the first sortie I went and collected AK-47s and pistols from dead enemies to arm those inside. Never mind. Past. I shouldn't be upset right now. I have far more reason to be upset. I'm 32 years old. I still retain some Army habits. I run, swim, exercise, and try to keep fit. I get up early and am responsible. Until 2 weeks ago, I was a rising star at Mercanos, having worked there for the past 5 years. Mercanos is a local conglomerate that designs and manufactures offices for doctors. I was part of the design team. At Mercanos, I met my wife, or now ex-wife. She was part of the leadership of the design team, and she became mine from the moment I saw her. I don't know what it was, but it was love at first sight. Or lust, anyway. Tara Barron was tall, beautiful, with long, lush brown hair. She had been at Mercanos for 18 months when we met, and even then I noticed signs of frustration, of wanting more out of her job and facing a glass ceiling. She loved what she was doing, but was pissed off by those above her. But it was okay. We sat at the bar on a Friday night, moaned about those who stood in our way, and socialized. And it was great. She was flirty, but very reserved. You had to really understand her and dig deep into her words to catch the humor. And that's what I did. Sometimes she would say something in a meeting, and everyone else would let it pass, and I wouldn't. And she purposely didn't look at me because she knew if she did, one of us, or both of us, would start laughing. It wasn't long before we were in bed. It was great. It took 9 months before we decided to commit to marriage. 3 months after moving in together. Things happened fast, but that's just the way we are. We saw what we wanted, made a decision, moved towards it. It was bliss. I was so infatuated with her and couldn't believe she was infatuated with me. We were going to conquer the world, and for 4 years we did. Everything was great. And then the end came. I was in the dark. I didn't see it happening. I didn't have any thoughts. I was just working and loving life. I didn't notice anything obvious. No recession. No late nights on her part. No major changes. Maybe there were, but I just didn't notice them. I can doubt myself forever, but anyway, I didn't expect it. It completely blindsided me. One Friday night, she just didn't come home. I called her cell phone. She had one of the first ones, those big Motorola ones. No answer. She didn't show up all weekend, and I was furious. Called the police and everything. Sunday night, she just walked in on me like nothing happened and said the words no man wants to hear. We need to talk. She told me where she was. At the house of our boss, Peter Western. The test driver lives with him. They've been doing this for the last 3 months. She decided there was no other way to break through the glass ceiling, so she slept with him and intended to continue her relationship with him. She loved me and thought it wasn't fair to me, so she was going to divorce me. She loves me, but I can't lead her where she wants to go. Surely I can understand her position. I don't even know where to begin. I was just in shock. I had no idea her mental processes were so complex. I had no idea she was capable of such a thing. Obviously, I didn't know her at all. Maybe it's my fault. Or maybe it was her fault for hiding her career needs so well. We used to sit together and make fun of him, and now she's sleeping with him, and she's making it clear that she intends to marry him. But first, she's going to rape our life savings. She's entitled, apparently. I just didn't know how to react. I mean, I did, but no one had gotten slapped that day. I mean, I couldn't even ask why. She told me. I just couldn't do for her what this other guy could, and out of loyalty to me, she ended the relationship. I did note, though, that she had already admitted to sleeping with him for a few months. Loyalty, my ass. She just wanted to marry the prick, and I was in the way. Marianne said I should express my feelings here. Well, I was surprised, upset, puzzled, numb, angry, scared, and apoplectic, all at the same time. She never said anything. There were no hints. It just came out of the blue. When I arrived at work on Monday, there was an asshole boss waiting at my desk, concerned that I might take it the wrong way and make the workplace unpleasant. And I was damn right. How exactly was I supposed to take it? It was obvious he just wanted me to shut up and not make a fuss. So screw it. I wondered if he understood the mercenary reason she wanted to be with him. But hell, why should I have to explain it to him? Let him figure it out for himself. Of course, I reached out to HR and his boss, and they didn't give a shit. There was no morality. It took 3 days, but eventually I was told that it all sucks. But they don't have a no fraternization policy for employees or a morals clause, so they just won't get involved. Sorry, but that's some harsh shit. Anyway, someone looked at who they needed more, one designer or a design group manager and her VP boss, and made the business decision to just ignore it. They were sorry, and it sucks. And between you and me, he's scum for stealing my wife away from me. But that's life in the big city. I'm sorry. In those 3 days, several people came up to me and said, I'm sorry. They all had something to say to me, which meant they all knew about it before I did. Apparently, it all happened during work hours, and I just didn't see it because I was with my head in the design lab doing my job, and not one bastard said a word to me. Nobody. The guys I worked with just avoided my gaze. They knew, but nobody said anything. When HR said they wouldn't do anything, I quit on the spot. Obviously, I couldn't continue working there. Tara came over to me as I was packing and told me I had done something stupid and just reacted instead of thinking things through. The Mercanos had plenty of room for both of us. She was sorry, but it happened, and I should make the best of it. She had the nerve to ask if I knew how she felt, what choices she had to make, how hard they were to make. Either way, someone lost. I tried to explain that she put herself in that position, and if she hadn't gone and seduced her boss to gain an advantage, she wouldn't have had to make that choice and I wouldn't be paying for it. But I think that logic was too strong for her. If she admitted that, she'd have to admit that she's a scheming bitch who just dropped me like a hot potato to get the next job. She has no idea how I felt or why. Not the slightest clue. I still can't understand how I could have failed to see that side of her. I'm an asshole, of course. I guess love really is blind. I had no idea. Not the slightest clue. Not even the slightest hint. I told her she was a dumb shit and I wanted nothing to do with her or this asshole boyfriend of hers. I said something about having their backs. I wouldn't have done anything. I'd seen enough in my life. But that was all I had left. A bit of a prank. The next day I got a visit from the cops, but it was their word against mine. Screw 'em. I spent a long weekend with Manny in Wisconsin, getting drunk most of the time, and he suggested I see a therapist. So when I came back, I did. And she said it was the first step to regaining my self-control. What's that phrase? Self-control. I didn't know anyone else had it. I thought it went away in the 1950s. And here I am, writing here, trying to describe the incredible betrayal I feel toward my wife who chose a career over love. And was it love at all? I mean, how could it be if she just gave it up like that? Either she knows how to shut off her emotions or she's a cold bitch. Or both. Probably both. Next chapter. The funeral was held on a damp fall day. It had rained since morning and the grass was still wet. It was overcast and the clouds looked threatening, low in the sky, dark and heavy, promising more rain. But it didn't rain, and April was thankful for that. At Arlington National Cemetery, she arrived early. Julian Sullivan was a veteran, and she had spent the day on the phone with various government agencies to get him buried there. She didn't know where else they would bury him if they refused, so she just didn't accept their initial refusal. She had Max with her on a new leash. He kept wanting to get up and wander around, and she had to jerk the leash a few times to make him realize, no, this was not the time to play. And she sent out a few letters letting him know when the funeral would be held, but she didn't expect anyone else to come but her and the priest she had hired. She was surprised when a black limousine pulled up to the house and a black-clad Tara Western, née Sullivan, stepped out with a red rose in her hands. She studiously avoided looking at her. Then another car pulled up, and Penny Glasso and her son Aaron got out. It was another surprise. No Mark. Good thing, too. Dermot arrived, accompanying both Jessica Ingrams herself and Desiree. Desiree kissed her on the cheek and whispered, "Megan wanted to be here, but she's still in the field. She is thinking of you and will see you when she returns." After that, a squad of nuns arrived, along with a few women who were down on their luck. One of them April recognized as the nun she had talked to at the homeless shelter. They were followed by people arriving in cars with West Virginia license plates. April could only assume they were people from Charlestown, where Joe lived. Sarah Atwood and a few other older women showed up and helped each other out. The Joe Sullivan and Holiness Brigade, April mentally dubbed them. Marianne Dabowski appeared, looking dressed up. April noticed her nod to Jessica Ingrams, who nodded back. She set that information aside for later. No wonder Marianne had figured her out. She knew Jessica. A van pulled up, and 20-odd people piled out of it. All elderly, all grisly, some clearly damaged. Some were missing legs, one was missing an arm. April was worried she'd only ordered 20 chairs because she was sure she'd be the only one there. Right now, there was standing room only. Then Ambrose Hiller appeared, looking more presentable than she'd seen him before. And then, to her surprise, a man of short stature, unfamiliar to her, with curly hair and wearing a fedora, came up to her and said, "Hi, I'm Manny Trueso. You don't know me, but I know you. I know what you did," he told me. Trueso pointed to Hiller, who only smiled embarrassedly. "I must say thank you. You got him justice for those bitches." He nodded toward the two women who, sitting side by side, were doing their best not to know of each other's existence. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, gesturing to the chair next to her. She only nodded at him, and as she sat down, he said, "We can talk later. There are stories about Julian you need to hear." The hearse from the Slow Path Funeral Home arrived. She took care of that too, paying for the funeral expenses. She figured it was the least she could do. The people who got out of the van walked over to the hearse and politely but firmly explained to the people from the funeral home that they would be carrying the deceased. At the same time as the hearse, to her utter amazement, a squad of Marines with guns also arrived. The staff sergeant nodded to Manny, and the squad fell into formation. Manny leaned over and said quietly, "The military remembers its own. This sergeant is alive because of Joe. He's one of the Cambridge crew. I'll explain later." The funeral was slow and quiet until a 21-gun salute by the Marines. They draped the casket with a flag, folded it, and handed it to Aaron, who accepted it with tears in his eyes. Max kept pulling on the leash and whimpering. He finally broke free and rushed over to the table where the casket had been during the funeral and plopped under it. He knew where his master was and just wanted to be with him as devoted dogs do. It broke all the hearts of those present. April didn't have the heart to call him back. When the funeral was over, April asked Ambrose to come forward and announce that the meeting would be held at a local Irish pub that was just outside of Arlington. April didn't trust herself to speak. She was still too angry with almost everyone. Most of those who had come to pay their last respects to Joe in death had noticeably disrespected him in life. When everyone was gathered at the pub, April grabbed Ambrose and led him over to where Tara was sampling the wine, not enjoying it too much and not really hiding it. Max was sitting at the bar while some of the funeral attendees amused themselves by slipping him some beer into a dish of water on the floor. He shifted his gaze from one person to another, and it was obvious who he was looking for. "Ambrose, I'm not sure if you know Tara or not. She was Joe's first wife. She has something she wants to tell you." Hiller looked at Tara questioningly. She was tall and her face had a tendency to look down on people. Right now, however, she was desperately trying to be herself. She looked around for a place to put the wine and stopped at the mantelpiece. "Yes. April told me about everything you did for Julian, how you didn't let him leave, how you found his hideout, and how you got the Marines to show up for the funeral. I want you to know that Julian would have liked you. He liked tenacious people. I wish you could have known him. He was the finest man I've ever met." She snorted and wiped her nose with a napkin from her drink. "I was such a fool. Was consumed with work and career. Didn't notice what was in front of me." She sighed and shook her head, obviously still ashamed. "Anyway, I wanted to ask you if you could. Perhaps agree to dinner? I understand you've had a similar experience." Hiller looked at April, who smiled back. The smile faltered a bit and became somewhat forced as he just stared at her. "So this is the same Tara, huh? The one that ruined our boy?" Tara snorted again and turned away, muttering, "I told you this was a bad idea." She turned around and said, "I just thought, look, yeah, I've been an asshole. But I've learned. You obviously haven't. Whatever. I thought, whatever, forget it." And she was about to leave, but April said sharply, "Stay here, Tara." Tara tensed and stopped, but didn't turn around. "And you, asshole. Hiller! You're such a goddamn catcher that you can afford to be rude to someone who took a chance? What an asshole. No wonder your relationship wasn't glorified. Look at you. You look like a bum and act even worse. What the hell have you got to lose? Look at her. She's beautiful. She's successful. And she's learned some damn hard lessons. You don't think you have anything to learn? Jesus Christ, what would it take for you to wake up and realize that everyone has to take a risk sometime? You disgust me because you're too stupid to live. I'm going to go get a drink." April walked away without looking back, trying her best to keep a smug expression on her face. Hiller and Tara were left standing with a confused look. Tara was still standing with her back to him, and Hiller didn't know where to look, and instead stared at his beer. Eventually, Tara asked, "Did she leave?" Hiller hummed in response. Tara turned around, her face tense. She looked to see if anyone had noticed. No one noticed, or at least no one looked back. She grabbed her wine from the mantelpiece to keep herself occupied. They drank their drinks in silence for a while, just standing next to each other, but not close enough to be together. Then Hiller said, "She's right, you know. I'm damaged goods. One completely spoiled marriage because of work and not being able to see straight to work on a case." Tara smiled and said, "I can hear that. You and me both." Hiller sighed. "I'm jumping to conclusions. I don't come home on time. I've got a backlog of scumbags to clean up, and I don't sleep well." "Yeah," Tara said. "Easy. I work all hours, my phone's on all the time, and I work from home too. And I snore, obviously. This is no joke. I have guns hidden all over my apartment. I purposely plaster the hallway with things that make noise so I can hear people coming in. I eat blended pizza for breakfast, and I haven't had my suit dry cleaned in a month." "Oh, really? You think you're so cool, don't you? I bet I can drink more than you too?" "Oh, shit. Be serious," Hiller replied. "I can outdrink a beanpole like you any day of the week." "Great. Is that what you think? Great. Hossack's Bar, Wednesday. I'll have my own driver, so neither of us will have to drive. Prepare to have a woman hold your ass, Mr. Hiller." "Fine. Fine." And they both stood, sipping their drinks and wondering what exactly had just happened. Across the room, April stood at the bar, looking at the two of them in the mirror and smiling to herself. Everything looked perfect on paper, but you never know when you'll meet two people. "Miss Carlyle?" She heard someone's question, interrupting her musings. She turned around and there stood Manny in his fedora. "Hi, Manny, right? One of Julian's army buddies?" "Yes, ma'am. I want you to meet some people. This is John Graves." John was one of the observers during the events in Cambridge. He and Joe go way back. "And this guy who needs a shave is Sal Samri. Sal was in the hospital with me in Kuwait. All of these guys are part of the Cambridge events. Show her, guys." They all rolled up their sleeves. All had the same tattoo. "Ma'am," one of the men said, "we know what you did. We just wanted to thank you and give you this." Another man held out a t-shirt with the Cambridge motto tattooed on it. "We figured you probably wouldn't go for the tattoo, but since you're one of us now, we thought you should have this." April didn't know what to say back. Eventually, she found her speech and asked, "One of you?" "Of course. Joe Sullivan saved you too. We figured that makes you part of the Cambridge team." I... April genuinely didn't know what to say. "I don't deserve this. Really, I don't. I couldn't even say thank you to him." "As far as I know, like Joe said, as long as there are people willing to do these things, you'll never have to do it," Manny said. April smiled a wide, sincere smile. "Okay, drinks are definitely on me. Who's going to be there? Has anyone mentioned stories about Joe? I'd like to hear them. Also, I shouldn't give up on the tattoo just yet, although I may have to find the right place for it." Postscript. The book American Life, as it was published, was a quiet success. It topped the New York Times book list for 2 weeks and then achieved even more success when Oprah called it one of her favorite things. The book has become required reading at several top colleges, but so far no one has tried to buy the screen rights. All profits went to the Julian Sullivan Foundation, headed by Tara Western, which is dedicated to providing scholarships to aspiring writers, with preference given to those serving in the armed forces. After the publication of American Life and its promotion by Oprah, even the President of the United States got involved, mentioning Joe Sullivan in his State of the Union address that same year, calling him a quiet American hero who does for others but never asks for himself, even under the most difficult circumstances on which this country was built. The military launched an investigation into the events in Cambridge and eventually posthumously awarded Joe Sullivan the Purple Heart and the Congressional Medal of Honor for his actions that day. His son, Aaron, even traveled to Washington, D.C. to accept the award. Manny and some members of his team were also awarded Medals of Valor, and the Army's top general publicly apologized for the incident going unreported for so long. But it didn't stop there. Joe Sullivan's then commander, 2-star General James Patterson, retired, who was a regular talking head on CNN, was asked to participate in a debate on military injustice. He spoke and was completely dismantled by the other three panelists, all of whom had served in the military. He had no answers as to why he punished people, and CNN refused to contract with him. The military, without further ado, retroactively demoted him to colonel. 3 weeks after American Life published, 3 of the 4 designers Mark Glasso worked for quit en masse. All of them were married, and none of them wanted Glasso by their side. They quit together, and when Glasso objected that he was a happily married man and they had nothing to fear from him, he was told, "Yeah, I'm sure Joe Sullivan thinks the same way." 2 weeks after that, 85% of his customers canceled their orders. Glasso was living in a Best Western hotel, kicked out by Penny after evidence of his own deception was presented, and suddenly 3 lawsuits came at him at once. One for alienation of affection from the husband of his personal assistant, the second for participating in the divorce of the same couple, and the third for failing to comply with his own company's rules regarding interpersonal relationships within the company. He was amazed at this, pulled out his company's charter and set of rules, and, to his amazement, found that there was indeed such a clause. In leaving Joe Sullivan, Mark had taken everything he could get his hands on, his clients, his wife, and the charter and rule book that Joe had written. He hadn't even thought about it at the time, just looked it over to make sure it fit, renamed the company's header to the top one, and used it. He was puzzled as to how they knew the clause existed, but then again, that damned American Life book had mentioned it. It had been brought up to Joe Sullivan's attention. The IRS had found a few discrepancies in his accounting, and while they were small, given the loss of designers and customers, they were enough to ruin the company. 3 days before he was about to declare bankruptcy, he was offered $32,000 for the company, a sum that did not go unnoticed by him. He had no choice but to accept the offer. The company came under the control of the Julian Sullivan Foundation and was renamed Sullivan's Designs. The 3 designers who had quit were offered to return to work, and 2 accepted, while the other had already found another job. Sullivan's Designs is now the preferred design group for Mercanos. Peter Western was found in a motel in Sweetwater, Texas, 4 months later. Sweetwater was a small town near Abilene. What he was doing there, he couldn't really say. He woke up after a night spent drinking beer in a hotel bar in Fort Worth. He hadn't been robbed, but there were scratches on many parts of his body. Hector Gonzalez was never found in Mexico or Paraguay. However, it is worth noting that very soon after Julian Sullivan's murder, Bogotá's main niche brothel in Colombia had a new employee. It turned out to be a man who took up residence in Payne's room. The occupants of that room never stayed long, but nothing was left unattended. Aaron Glasso changed his name to Aaron Sullivan at the first opportunity. One Saturday, Manny and his crew came over to take him around and tell him stories about his old man. When Penny wouldn't let him, Manny walked with her into the kitchen, talked for about 10 minutes in silence, and after that she never prevented him from seeing the Cambridge crew again. Every time one of them was in town, they'd stop by and take him to some museum or other and tell him stories. April even went with them when she wasn't in the field. She made the cabin available to anyone who wanted it, and it was often used. She was sure Joe would have loved it. Tara Western retired a few days before American Life came out, having made prior arrangements with April that she was allowed to. Her duties with the local homeless shelter would be taken over by the Cambridge film crew. She moved to Austin, Texas, where she bought a horticultural crop farm. They grew palm trees and fruit trees that were sold at Lowe's and Home Depot stores. She found several other local homeless shelters where she began volunteering. April wasn't about to let her leave her side, and to her credit, neither was Tara. Hiller quit his job too and moved to Austin. Tara married him as soon as she could, if only to get his last name and get rid of her own. Every time Ambrose Hiller got angry at Tara's behavior towards him, he called her Mrs. Sullivan, and it made her stop and think. They try to keep in touch with April and invite her to their annual 4th of July party every year, as well as Thanksgiving, but she never. comes. She hadn't dealt with her anger yet. She wasn't ready to see Tara happy. She knew it was wrong of her and very unprofessional. But there it was. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.